This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's special guest is a legendary multi-award-winning actor who's been dazzling audiences for 6 decades with one unforgettable performance after another. On the big screen, you've seen him in dozens of great movies, including The Prisoner of Second Avenue, The Sunshine Boys, All the President's Men, Scarface, The Name of the Rose, Star Trek, Insurrection, Mighty Aphrodite, An Innocent Man, Finding Forrester, The Grand Budapest Hotel, The Magic Flute, and of course, Amadeus, for which he won the Academy Award and the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor, as well as a BAFTA Award nomination for his brilliant portrayal of the envious composer Antonio Salieri. And on television, he's received 4 Emmy Award nominations, 2 for his work in Homeland, 1 for his voice work in Moon Knight, and 1 for his performance in The White Lotus, for which he also won a Screen Actors Guild Award and a Golden Globe Award nomination. He also received 3 more Screen Actors Guild Award nominations, 2 for his work in Homeland and 1 for his performance in the Grand Budapest Hotel. And he received an Online Film and Television Association Award nomination for his performance as C.W. Longbottom in Mythic Quest. He's appeared in many TV movies and miniseries, including Marco Polo, Dream West, Noah's Ark, The Betrothed, A Season of Giants, Dead Man's Walk, White House Plumbers, and dozens more. And in the world of theater, our guest has appeared in 13 Broadway shows, including The Man in the Glass Booth, The Ritz, Macbeth, Angels in America, Millennium Approaches, and Perestroika, Triumph of Love, and It's Only a Play. He's also appeared in over 30 off-Broadway productions. For his work in theater, he's won 2 Obie Awards for his performances in Uncle Vanya and The Merchant of Venice, and he's been nominated for 3 Drama Desk Awards and 2 Drama League Awards. And if all of that weren't enough, our guest received a Grammy Award nomination for Best Spoken Word Album for Interview with the Vampire. He received the John H. Finley Award for exemplary dedicated service to the city of New York, the John Gielgud Award for excellence in the dramatic arts, and in 1990, he received an honorary doctorate from Rider University. And in 2015, he was inducted into the American Theater Hall of Fame. Our guest is currently in rehearsal for a new off-Broadway production at the Irish Repertory Theater called Beckett Briefs, and he's taken time out of his very busy rehearsal schedule to speak with me today. I'm delighted and deeply honored to welcome the incomparable FMurrayAbraham to our show. Murray, thank you so much for being here.
You embarrass me, my friend. You really do. It's nice to hear all those awards and so on, but it's embarrassing. But thank you.
Well, you should just soak it up, because those awards and accolades, first of all, I was only scratching the surface. And secondly, you earned them. You really did.
Thank you.
Now, your father came to America with his family from Syria when he was a child. Your mom was the child of Italian immigrants. You grew up in Texas. Your dad was an auto mechanic. You didn't come from a theatrical family. When did you know you wanted to be an actor?
I don't know. It's one of those extraordinary things that happens in our lives. I think those things over which there's no control over our destiny. I'm not saying that I was destined, but I can say that I really was just looking to get out of high school, just to go on with my life and get out of El Paso and start whatever my future was going to be. I had no idea. And this teacher, out of nowhere, said, "You should try this." And she introduced me to the theater. I mean, no background in the theater at all. I love telling jokes and stories, but it had nothing to do with acting. And from then on, it's odd how do you explain, for example, falling in love with someone? You suddenly bump into someone and you're in love. I mean, that's how I met my wife of 60 years, But the point is, I did realize that that's where I belonged. That's part of the trick of this life, isn't it? To recognize those things when they happen. Because sometimes we regret years later not doing that thing that we felt we should. The point is, I knew instantly when I stepped on the stage that that's where I belonged. How do you explain that, considering where I came from? Strictly blue collar, coal miners, steel workers. It's a gift, I think. I don't want to carry out too much about it, but it's a mystery, and I'm very grateful for it. May I mention the teacher's name, please? Because she did change my life. God rest her soul. Lucia P. Hutchins.
Well, we all owe a debt of gratitude to Miss Hutchins because she saw something in you. She saw a spark of talent, and I do believe in destiny. And I tell you, Marie, when I look at your acting, I see a fusion of a great technique, which comes from the preparation and the research you've done, along with a very powerful instinct or intuition that seems to carry you in the moment, which creates this amazing sense of spontaneity, as if you're discovering yourself at the same time that we're discovering you. Does that make sense?
Well, it doesn't always work, but that's what I try to achieve. I think it's the essence of good work is exactly what you've described. If I could, if I can do that, if an actor can do that you've just described with a Greek tragedy that's 2,500 years old, if he can make that seem spontaneous, then he's achieved what I think the art and the craft are meant to achieve. I think it encourages the audience to identify with that live moment in themselves, and it brings Shakespeare to life.
Did you have to teach yourself not to be afraid of following your instincts?
I teach from time to time. I teach maybe once a year, a master class, and I enjoy teaching. But the first thing I always say is don't be afraid. But in fact, it's something I have to continually tell myself.
I've heard you say that when you're acting, you're not taking on the persona of someone else. You're endowing it with qualities in yourself that you feel reflect your understanding of that character. So, my question to you, Marie, is this: if you're playing a truly evil character who does something monstrous, what is your process for finding that quality of evil in yourself so that you can incorporate it into the role you're playing?
Well, if you're not willing to accept the fact that there are inherently in each of us the capability of evil, there's always a choice. You can do the right thing or you can do the evil thing. But the elements are there in each of us, I think. The triumph over evil is for me is the goal of humanity. It's what separates us from the animal. But the fact is that they exist. For example, if I played someone in Angels in America, it's a great play by Kushner, but it's a great part. And it was a man that I just detested personally. I couldn't bear him. If you are playing someone that you don't like, you cannot play that person fully. So I had to find within myself something that I could identify with that character. I was having trouble. I was delivering a performance, but it wasn't rich enough until I discovered through a lawyer who had practiced a case against him. He was talking about losing the case to this man, Cohn, but he couldn't take his eyes off him during the trial. And I instantly knew what I could do. I said, that I understand. So I began to play the charismatic aspect of this man. And in those terms, I understood him and I could play him fully and well, even though I hated what he lived for and did. I'm going on and on about this because this is essentially what I have to do each time I do a performance. I'm going through that now with the Beckett's Craps Last Tape, because Beckett's play, this play particularly, is a memory play. And consequently, I have decided to go into my own diaries from the past 40 years, which I happen to have, and check out certain things about myself. They're not all very lovely. Some of them are not memories I care to recall. But in order to do this role properly, I have to examine and investigate my own sometimes sourest memories. And I hate to go on and on about this. I'll stop shortly. But this is really essentially the kind of work I do. And under the whole thing, by the way, I should explain that I really love it. That sustains me. And I think in those terms, I'm really lucky. And I've been lucky my whole life in those terms, even when I wasn't working. I never forgot my devotion to the craft, even though I've done some pretty bad scripts and some not very good work. It doesn't always work, by the way. Sometimes it's no good at all.
Well, your love of the craft is definitely something that's very apparent in everything you do. Now, this may be an odd question, Marie, but do you think there's a spiritual quality to your creativity as an actor?
There's no doubt in my mind that there's a spiritual quality. I'm a deeply religious man, but I think it's to the craft as much as anything else. I'm very grateful for this talent that I've been given and the opportunity and the good health to continue. I'm 85 years old and I feel I'm in good shape. That's good fortune.
God bless you. And I hope you keep going for another 80 years. I read that when you were filming Scarface in Los Angeles, you were also filming Amadeus in Czechoslovakia, in Prague, traveling back and forth. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was working on Scarface. We were rehearsing it in LA when I got word that Milos Forman wanted me for the part. So they had to balance the schedule, and I would fly back and forth. Then, by the way, it's not as hard as it sounds. It's kind of romantic actually, because the parts are so different that one was kind of a vacation from the other. And I would study, on that long plane ride, I would study the part I was going to be doing, and then the other one on the way back. I must tell you, it was kind of a vacation.
Well, because you were making both movies at the same time, are there any aspects in the subtleties of your performance in Scarface that we might also detect in Amadeus?
That's a very good question because, in fact, the character that I played in Scarface, I actually had a Mexican accent when I grew up. I'm from the border of Mexico and El Paso. So that accent wasn't difficult for me. But in fact, if you look carefully, there are certain gestures that I have that are shared by both those characters. Otherwise, no, there's nothing at all like, no, no, nothing. Anyhow, you take a look yourself and see if you can see what I'm talking about.
I'm going to. I was struck by something you said in your acceptance speech when you won the Oscar for Amadeus. You said that the director Milos Forman had a great deal to lose when he cast you and Tom Hulce in Amadeus. What did you mean by that?
I think I mentioned that because he was at the top of his game and he was famous and he could have ensured the financial success of the film because by casting box office blockbuster stars, everyone in the business wanted those two parts. I mean, the most famous actors in the world went to him. And that took a lot of courage because, and the producer as well gets credit for backing him up because I was unknown and so was Tom. And you're gambling your whole reputation because, you're only as good as your last success in this business. That's maybe in any business. But the point is, if that was a failure, it would have set him way back. It would have been the loss of a great deal of money. And they don't forget that in Hollywood. So he had everything to lose. I had nothing to lose at all. For me, it was just a great opportunity. What he saw in me is, to me, a mystery. It's the same thing that perhaps my teacher in high school so many years before saw, because we didn't know each other. I wasn't famous. He didn't ever saw my work. So he saw something. And all I can say is that took a lot of courage. Don't be afraid. And he wasn't.
Do you ever sit down and watch your movies?
I do it once, maybe, or twice just to see the mistakes I made, see what I did. And otherwise I can't. It's all I see is the mistakes. In Amadeus, there are a couple of good things. I mean, some really good things. I'm proud of them. But generally, I would like to redo a lot of stuff. The scene between the dictation scene between Tom and me is as good as anything any two-hander ever filmed, I think. That's my favorite scene.
Yeah, that's a magnificent scene. Now, many people described your character, Salieri, as a villain, but did you see him as a villain?
Hmm. No, I saw him as a man, as a human being with real flaws. That performance, by the way, that movie affected musicians of all stripes deeply. I'm talking about jazz, rock and roll. Anyone who's seen that, who's a musician, is deeply affected by it. But the thing about his being a villain is silly. The difference between him and Cohn, the guy I played in Angels in America, is that Cohn detested, chose humanity as his opponent. He just had no regard, but he had no sense of humanity. But Salieri chose God as his opponent. I thought that's really bold. He really how can you, what kind of a man is that who chooses an opponent like God? Anyway, he did. I would like to remind you that the thing about Salieri, one of the aspects that I love about him is if you'll recall the first time that you meet him in the mental institution, do you recall what he's doing?
He's playing the piano.
He's composing.
Right.
Never gave up. I really adore that about him.
Well, when Amadeus first came out, there was a lot of controversy among historians about how accurate the script was regarding the character and the behavior of Salieri. Did you do a lot of research about him?
Yes, I did, but the fact is that he was a very good man and he was a friend of Mozart's. He helped him a lot. It was good fodder for the film. That's for Peter Schaffer. He was a good man. He was a really a terrific man.
What would you say was the biggest impact on your career of winning an Academy Award?
The discovery of immense hubris on my part. I became, I think, for a while insufferable. I, I really, nothing was good enough for me. It was a rough 2 years. I mean, I got work and I made some money, but I began to think I really knew a lot, and I didn't. I only knew what I knew. I just thought and pretended that I knew more than I did.
So, what made you readjust your sense of self?
I don't know. If you continue to work and if you're fortunate enough, and I was, married to a woman who reminded me from time to time, just by the way she lives her life, of who I am, which is just I'm a man with a talent, and it's my obligation to serve that talent and to pay the rent. Let's not forget that. I've done some work I'm not real proud of, but you do what you have to do.
I want to quote something you said in an interview some time ago when you were asked about winning the Oscar. You said, even though I won the Oscar, I can still take the subway in New York and nobody recognizes me. Some actors might find that disconcerting, but I find it refreshing. Now, of course,
Yeah.
Murray, you were talking about the impact of being famous. So let me ask you directly, how well do you feel you've managed to cope with fame?
Well, it's been about over 40 years. So it took me a couple of years finally to adjust, but I think I've been doing very well with it. The fact is that I use the Oscar as a something fun. In every play I've ever done, he appears on stage. I don't know if you know that.
No, I
I
didn't.
Oh yeah, every play because he's kind of responsible for me getting all this work that I've done in the theater for years. I give him to the stage management and they conceal him on the stage not so the audience could see it, but just for the actors to discover. He's appeared in suitcases and in trash cans, and they make little costumes for him, costumes from the show. I have a lot. I have a lot of costumes for Oscar. At the present time, he's in a favorite bistro of mine. He's up on the shelf with a bunch of other bottles, and people don't know. They just think it's another bottle of whiskey. No,
It's
I
really
think it's fun.
hilarious because for a while people were referring to the Oscar curse and they used your name as an example of the Oscar jinx. And I
Yeah.
don't think you ever saw it as a jinx, did you?
No, no. What they're suggesting is that after the success, the big success of that film and my winning, is that I didn't instantly leap into movies and that whole world of film in LA. I stayed in New York and I did the play. First thing I did was Mad Woman of Chaillot here in town for like $90 a week or something. It's the work that's important. It always has been.
You've worked with Sean Connery twice, I believe, in The Name of the Rose
Yeah.
and Finding Forrester. What were your impressions of him?
Oh, he's terrific. We really got along. He was absolute professional. He showed up on time and he knew his lines and he knew everything and he was good to be around. It was funny to walk into a restaurant with him because everybody vanishes. It's they're all looking at Sean. Well, that happens with the big stars. Sophia Loren was the same way. People like that. No, I have nothing but admiration and respect for Sean. He was terrific to work with.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but in the DVD commentary for The Name of the Rose, the director of the movie, Jean-Jacques Arnaud, described you as an egomaniac, which is certainly not your reputation in the industry. What do you make of that?
I don't know where that came from because he was so nice to me and my wife. He and his wife invited me to come and stay with them in their place that they had designed in France. But I think it came out, I don't know why he accepts what he reads in the paper, but I had mentioned in several interviews, I mentioned that there were times when the actors were forgotten. For example, they were left up on the cross for one of those scenes in cold weather, and nothing was done to take care of them or to put blankets on them. And I said that he, like many directors, are so focused on getting this film done that they forget things like taking care of the actors. That's what I said. And this actor I'm talking about was a favorite of his in Quest of Fire. And my point is, when it was reported, I imagine when this was written up in whatever newspaper it was, it came off like I was really severely critical of Jean-Jacques. I wasn't, I never was. I have huge respect for the man. He's trilingual completely and very smart and bright. And if I had been, as he described, that egomaniac, which I'm not, you can see that. But if that had been true, Sean would never have accepted me to be in the next film with him. So that's proof, and the proof is in the pudding. And I wish that I could get this straight with Jean-Jacques because I really respect him.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe it when I heard him say that. It's totally
Not true.
contrary to everything that everyone in the industry says about you. And if you were really an egomaniac, when I gave you that introduction, you would have loved it. You wouldn't have been embarrassed, right?
You can't, you can't, yeah, I guess. Let me tell you a quick thing about New York City. When I first won the award, I was going to interviews from Brooklyn, and I didn't have any money. We didn't get paid a lot of money for that movie, and I would carry the Oscar in a paper bag with me on the subway. And this one time, the subway where I was about 20 minutes into town, and I was sitting next to this guy for the whole ride. And as he got off at his stop, he had not said a word to me. He leaned over to me as he went out and said, "Congratulations," and he left.
That's New York.
That's New York.
That's New York. Now, when The Name of the Rose came out in 1986, you did an interview for People magazine, and you said that you were growing tired of playing villains and you wanted to do more comedies like you did in the beginning and more diverse roles. So, looking back, Murray, do you feel you accomplished that goal to your satisfaction?
I'm very good at comedy. I like to make people laugh. I love telling stories. But you do what you have to do to pay the rent. I have these two children. I have a wife. I have rent. I have education to pay for. So I did some things I wasn't real, that were villains. I mean, true villains. But no, I can just say you do what you have to do. And I can always go back to the theater, which I always do.
Well, that's for sure. Now, you had a prominent role in The Bonfire of the Vanities, but your name doesn't appear in the credits. Why not?
I I didn't think the role was big enough to take credit for. I liked De Palma a lot. He's a neighbor of mine, but I just didn't. I'll tell you something. I had a second-rate agent, and I stayed with him, and I shouldn't have. I took bad advice. That's all. I'll take the responsibility for it, but I should have been advised better. I should have taken credit.
Maybe loyalty in this business can hurt you.
Yeah, you can't be stupid about that. Loyalty is good, but you got to be smart, and I wasn't very smart. That's okay. I learned.
And what about working with Woody Allen in Mighty Aphrodite? I just
Oh,
loved that movie.
he's a treat. All these stories about him, I don't know. I think is unfair. He's a good man. He was absolutely the boss, quiet and with great power emanating from him. I loved it. He promised me we were going to work together again. I look forward to it.
Oh, I hope so. Now, you worked with Burt Lancaster in one of his very last movies, which was a TV miniseries called The Betrothed. And on May the 21st, 2000, you wrote a letter to the New York Times about how horribly he was treated on the set. Why did they
Yeah.
treat him so badly?
There's a line, I think, by the great statesman from Britain during the Second World War, Churchill. He said about the Nazis, they're either at your feet or at your throat. But I think that's true generally of people in general. When you're at the top of the pyramid, when you're that prominent, people really do worship you, kind of. When you're at the bottom, if you fall, they're the first to kick you when you're down. That seems to me, unfortunately, a natural thing with many, many people. So that's how they were treating him. He was not too solid with his lines. We worked together a lot, by the way, to get his lines. He just couldn't, he was losing it. He was too old. The point is, he was very sensitive to that. And they kept kind of moving him around the set and ignoring him. And I was furious. He was a very important man in the theater, in the film industry. So I went to his defense. I really got angry one afternoon. And he pulled me aside and he said, Murray, don't waste your energy on these bums. Now, I'm half Italian and I've done a lot of work in Italy and I'm grateful for it and I've had a good time. But the Italians are not the only people who are capable of that kind of treatment of once the great have fallen. They really enjoy kicking them around. Anyway, that's what I was talking about.
Well, I want to applaud you for writing that letter. It certainly was an eye opener. And wherever he is, I think Mr. Lancaster really appreciated it. Now, for all those Trekkies out there, I have to mention that you played Ruafo, the commander of the Sona, in the
Uh,
1998 movie Star Trek Insurrection. The makeup was so elaborate and complicated, and I'm just wondering how much of your performance in that movie was just letting the makeup define the character?
well, that was true also of Amadeus. That makeup was very helpful for the old man. It makes a lot of difference. And each one was about 4 hours in the morning each day. But that film could have been better. I'm sorry it wasn't because I had a really good time. The director of that film, a good director, wonderful man, with whom I've worked again, used to be a singer on Broadway. He was a baritone singer. And when we were together, I discovered that in my makeup, that reptile makeup, he and I would sing duets from Oklahoma. I really think it's important to have a good time, even though if you're playing a villain, especially if you're playing a villain.
Well, there was a scene in that movie where you and Patrick Stewart, who played Jean-Luc Picard, have a spectacular fight where you're about 4 stories off the ground. It looked so dangerous. Was that really you guys doing it for real?
Yeah, yeah, we were running around, jumping around.
No
I
special
like,
effects.
no, that was us. He was in good shape, and so am I. So was I. But he's a very good man. I guess you know his story. I mean, he really he uses his fortune very generously. He's established some really important charities. He's a good man.
Yeah, he's a wonderful guy. There's an interview that you gave on the special collector's edition DVD of Star Trek Insurrection. And you said, if I could only do Star Trek movies for the rest of my career, I would. That's how strongly I feel about this organization. I do not say that lightly. What was it about the Star Trek experience that made you love it so much?
It's not very often that you walk into a franchise like that one that's been running successfully for 20 years where you're treated well. Usually they just plug you in and you just go on. This was a real family. It was wonderful. Everyone, the crew, everybody was terrific. And I thought, well, and it was paying a lot of money. And I thought, this is fine. I love Shakespeare and I can always do it in my spare time, but this is fine. I'll be glad to play, except for the 4-hour makeup in the morning. I would be glad to be part of any organization that functions like that, like a family, like an organism, which is what it should be.
Yeah, that's what it should be. Now, in addition to playing Antonio Salieri, you've played a number of real people over the years. For example, in Dream West, you played Abraham Lincoln. In The First Circle and Children of the Revolution, you played Joseph Stalin. In Babyface Nelson, you played Al Capone. In White House Plumbers, you played Judge John Sirica. And you've mentioned on stage in Angels in America, you played Roy Cohn. What's your process when you're preparing to play a real person?
Well, if you're lucky enough to have this, the time to do some research, it's very helpful. Sirica was a boxer. He was close to becoming a professional boxer. And that was interesting for me to discover. I happen to like boxing, but what that explained was his independence as a juror. I thought a jurist, I thought this is why he's his own man. He knows what it's like to fight man to man and to fight for what he believes. I was very impressed with that aspect. Yes, it's very helpful. But by the same token, my imagination is my stock in trade. And dreaming up these lives. For example, I played Mephistopheles, and it's if I have a choice, I'd rather play Mephistopheles than play Faust, if you must know, because Mephistopheles is much more interesting. I respect Faust, but anyhow, the point is, Mephistopheles is interesting. The trick is to make him sexy, is to make him inviting. Try evil. It's really neat. You'll have a good time. That was one of the problems I had when I played in Name of the Rose. I didn't want that character to have any charm at all. I tried to make it as repulsive as possible. I didn't play him as Mephistopheles. I played him as a sick, warped human being. I think I accomplished it because I don't like that guy at all.
When you have to play someone like Abraham Lincoln, do you look at other performances that other actors have done so that you can try and take some guidance?
I think with Abraham Lincoln, it's always personal with Americans, particularly, because he is I think, their favorite president. He's a great man, but one of the few great intellectual presidents we've ever had. But no, you don't need any help with Abraham Lincoln. But my problem with Abraham Lincoln was that it was only a day's work, and they didn't compensate. He was one of the tallest men in the country, and that's quite a thing to say. But they didn't supply me with risers for my shoes, and I wasn't taller than everybody else. And my point is, the preparation for me was fun because I love Abraham Lincoln, but the accomplishment was second rate because, well, in this one scene I had with his wife, I was leaning up against the desk, and she was as tall as I. My point finally is there are certain things over which you have no control, and sometimes you come off looking very bad. One of my reviews for that particular character, I remember very well, by a man named Vincent Canby, no longer with us, a good critic. He said, Mr. Abraham was an unflattering miniature of Abraham Lincoln. I thought, that's pretty accurate. Isn't it funny? Anyhow, there's a long story. You know, if we ever had time and we ever got together and we met each other, I could fill you up with so many stories that are so interesting, but only to us.
I'll bet they would be. In fact, I think you should write a book, a memoir. You've already kept a journal. You've got all those memories written down.
You're very kind.
Your performance as Professor Robert Crawford in Finding Forrester is, in my opinion, so very memorable. The director was the incredibly gifted Gus Van Sant. Was making that movie an enjoyable experience for you?
Gus, because of Gus, you know that expression, the fish stinks from the head? That's true. He's such a good feeling man that it communicates to everyone on the set. And consequently, it's a pleasant place to work. He's so smart and so generous. I can't say enough about him. But yeah, I loved working on that film. And I thought that young boy, his name was Brown, that was his first job as an actor. Did pretty well.
Excellent performance. Well, you're very sensitive to the directors you work with. You worked with Wes Anderson in the Grand Budapest Hotel. He's known for being a director who knows exactly what he wants, very similar to the Coen brothers in that way. So when you have a director like that, Murray, who clearly states in simple terms what they want, how easy is it for you to trust that the director's vision is going to be good?
You just put your finger on it. You trust them. You don't watch yourself because you trust that they will be able to say, Murray, that stinks. They don't say that, but that's what it amounts to. Do this, try this. May I suggest? You trust their eye. It doesn't take long for you to understand or realize it when you have a bad director, a second-rate, poor director, or a non-director. It doesn't take long at all. And once that happens, you begin not to create, but rather to watch yourself. You become your own director. You're less an actor. And when you do that, it's not as spontaneous, which is what we're seeking as performers. So yeah, it's trust. And those directors you mentioned absolutely encourage that kind of trust.
Would you ever want to direct?
I don't think I have that kind of. No, I can teach. I can help, but direction is another thing. Nope, I don't think so.
Well, you've mentioned that you are of Italian descent on your maternal side. 2004, you co-starred in the fabulous movie Too Much Romance, It's Time for Stuffed Peppers with the magnificent Sophia Loren, directed by Lena Wertmuller. That must have been such a special experience for you.
Oh, it was fabulous. Yeah, we shot it in Naples, and she's a queen down there. You know, you walk into a restaurant with her, and everybody falls apart. It was wonderful. She was very good. My mother was very sick at the time. She was down with, I think, pneumonia in Texas. And I asked Sophia if she would please call and speak to my mother briefly. And when she talked to her for about a half an hour. I thought that was, well, that's Sophia.
In Italian?
No, some Italian. My mother speaks some Italian, but no, it was both. Besides, it was private. I wasn't listening. But I talked to my mother later. She was thrilled. But Lena Wertmuller was just great to work with. God bless her. First time I met her in Rome, I went to visit them and in her house in Rome, and one whole floor of her. She's got one separate floor full of her clothing. She loved clothes. She had shoes and clothes, and anyhow, she was great.
I'm so impressed that Sophia Loren took like over half an hour to speak
Right,
with
half
your
an hour.
mother on the phone when she knew
Yeah,
she wasn't well. What a heart
right.
that woman has.
Yes, wonderful.
Now, Murray, over the years, you've seen a number of major changes in the entertainment industry, including the culture and the ambiance and the working environment. Many veteran actors, most recently Louis J. Stadlin, have told me that working in the industry is not as much fun as it used to be because there's this hypersensitivity to political correctness. We all have to be so exceedingly careful in what we say because we might offend somebody inadvertently. I know you had an unfortunate experience on the set of Mythic Quest, but do you think political
Yeah,
correctness has made people lose their sense of humor?
definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how you can survive really without a sense of humor. You got to laugh at this life, you know. But everything you've said is true. Louis is right. Louis is right. You begin, as I said earlier, you begin to watch yourself, monitor yourself. That's not conducive to creativity. If you're watching yourself, you're not allowing instinct, the creative instinct over which you really should not have any control. You mustn't control. You should allow it to come. It's like Mozart. I mean, for him, the inspiration was constant, consistent. He called it up anytime he wanted it. Not everyone is like that. But no, he's right. It's also the industry has become it's less fun because it's much more there's the time crunch is more than it's ever been in my career, in my memory. It used to be that film was a little more slow paced, but now film is trying to shoot on the same kind of schedule as television. And you do where I used to do 2 pages in 2 days, or maybe a page and a half in 2 days, which is true of all the president's men, by the way. Now it's 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 pages a day. And for those of you who don't know, that translates into get it done, let's go. Go have a schedule. The schedule becomes more important than the quality. And of course, the quality is going to suffer.
So, how do you still make it fun?
Well, that's the trick. You got to you got to do whatever you can, whatever it takes to keep it alive. And you got to make certain demands. You have to say, no, I'm not going to do it that way. Give me a break. Wait a minute. Not everyone is in a position to do that.
And when you're off camera and you're just having a few moments to socialize with your castmates, how do you relax if you've got to be so worried that you might inadvertently tell a joke that somebody found off color or offensive? I mean, I went through this when I was a judge, and you can imagine there's a transcript, there's a court reporter taking down every word I said in the courtroom. And sometimes you just want to have a little levity, but somebody
Yeah.
will misinterpret or take offense to something you've said innocently. Is there some solution to that? Because I think it's really intense and it can be toxic.
It becomes a primary concern with everyone. It's that becomes it, where the where, where the work on the project should be primary, it becomes secondary because of what you just described. But as far as how it's going to, if it's going to change and when, I don't have a clue. It's too bad, and it's got to change. People have got to be able to laugh at themselves. They take themselves way too seriously. I mean, as I say, it's only a play, you know. Oh, hey, but in a film, I just finished an independent film I shot in the South called Over the Hill, and I told a joke at the beginning of every day for the whole company. I got permission from the director, and the first time I did it, it worked. So every day I would come up with a joke. And considering my age, I know jokes that these people, all of them, they've never heard before. So I can go through my whole repertoire. I have to be careful about which jokes I choose. But the fact is, it was a great way to gather the company at the beginning, have a laugh, and then do the work. Because with an independent company shooting a film these days, what you're working with is very little money and consequently a skeleton crew, people who are doing at least 2 or 3 jobs. And they're long days and they're 6 days a week, and a little relief is very important. And I don't think that's done. I'm sure it's not done often enough. But you put your finger on it. You really did. You can't let your guard down. That's too bad.
Yeah, I think it's really too bad. And it forces people to be so careful that they lose their spontaneity and it's just not fun. So I know that you've given master classes, you've been a professor of theater at Brooklyn College at the City University of New York. So if you were to choose one key message that you want your students to remember for the rest of their lives, what would it be?
Don't be afraid.
I love that. You know, you were one of only a handful of actors who've appeared in 2 movies that were selected for the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Those 2 movies are All the President's Men and Amadeus. Do you agree that those are the 2 most culturally significant movies you've made?
That's interesting.
Because I think The Mystery of Dante was a really important movie.
Yeah, he's a really important director too. Wonderful man. I'm glad you know that film. I don't think of myself in those terms. It's hard to. I'd have to think about it because it seems to me self-inflating to consider those things culturally important. Although I can tell you,
we're not just talking about your performance, we're talking about the project as a whole.
Yeah.
So if I were to select one of your movies as being the most culturally significant, that's a really tall order. But I think The Mystery of Dante, for the benefit of our viewers, the film explores the Divine Comedy through a documentary style look at the life and philosophy of Dante Alighieri. Really a very culturally important film. So that's the one I would pick for whatever it's worth. Now, I know you're getting ready to open on January 15th at the Irish Repertory Theatre in Beckett Briefs. It's a collection of 3 short plays. You'll be doing Krapp's Last Tape, which is a solo piece. You'll be playing an elderly man, Mr. Krapp, who reviews his life by referring to autobiographical tape recordings from his younger self. What drew you to this part?
Well, Beckett is a great writer. Godot we did was so rewarding. I think the only way to discover certain playwrights, including Shakespeare, is to do them, perform them. Pinter was an actor's playwright. Beckett is definitely an actor's playwright. But this one is his favorite play. And I felt like it was a great opportunity to try to accomplish what he tried to do, what he did. And I also believe that if you really want to consider yourself, your career, your life as an actor, if you want to be thought of as a great actor, you have to do the great roles. And one of the reasons is they're great for a reason, find out. But the other is you put yourself up against, or you are compared with every actor who's ever done that part. And that's a challenge. And when I did Shylock, I was pitting myself against Olivier and everyone who's ever done it. And when you do that, you find out what you're made of because you become a target. You know that when you're doing it, and it's okay. That's their job. The critics, they'll do whatever they do. But I know that when I get a part right, I know it in my soul. I don't need the approbation. It's great to have it, but it doesn't count for beans. What I carry with me is the idea, and I'll tell you, this is funny, but every actor who's done it, I think, will tell you that when they get Shakespeare right, they secretly believe that he wrote it for them. He wrote Shylock with me in mind. And this is for FMurrayAbraham. Well, it sounds silly, but the point is, once you discover something, when I played Bottom, for example, I loved Bottom. I mean, I couldn't wait to play him every night. I wrote about it once. You should take a look at that book.
The book
Faber
is
and
from
Faber.
2005. It's called A Midsummer Night's Dream, Actors on Shakespeare. And you did write about your experience of playing the character of Bottom in A Midsummer Night's Dream.
But I when I was playing it, as I told you, I really loved it, and we kept getting extended. We were a success, but no money, but it was just fun. And my dream, in my imagination, I wanted to be able to gather all the successful actors who successfully played that part over the past 4 centuries. I would like to have got us all together at once to discuss how we did it, to discuss where we succeeded and where we failed, and to anyone who plays that part well is a show off. And you'd have this room full of real first-rate show-offs insisting that their way was the right way. That would be fun.
Well, you wrote a book 20 years ago. How about another one? How about a memoir? Don't you think
Uh,
that you've got so many stories about your experiences in the business that when you're gone, those stories will go with you if you don't make them part of the historical record in a book?
yeah, I guess. I have a great respect for the written word, and I'm not about to. I'll try. I mean, I've written some stuff, but I know bad writing when I see it.
Something tells me the way you speak, it's not going to be bad writing. Now, Murray, I know that 2 years ago, your beautiful wife of 60 years, Kate Hannon, passed away, which is very traumatic, a tragic loss. How have you been doing since then? How are you?
It's been hard, but for the first time since she died, this last Thanksgiving, that was her favorite time. She was a great cook, and for the first time, I had the feeling that she was happy for us and that she was there in her spirit, truly. But it was a departure. My daughter and granddaughter were here with me, and so we went through it together. So it was the first time that I felt like now I can stop mourning her. It was a first step toward the acceptance of her death, because her absence is hard. It's it's hard, but it's become easier. I have no advice for anyone. I mean, I really don't. I'm just good luck. Because it's never going to go away. I mean, I still dream about her. It's very, very difficult in those terms, by the way, because all of my diaries are full of her. But what, that's part of why I'm doing this play. I thought that if I went into that mode, that memory mode when I'm doing this play, it would help to solve this mourning that I've been going through for a couple of years. And it seems to be working.
Well, I know I speak for all of our viewers when I express my deepest condolences to you and to your family. And you're honoring her memory so beautifully by going on and
Yes.
keep delivering great performances. Well, I only have one more question for you. It's very important. Are you ready, Marie? Is it true that back in the 70s, you were one of those fruity characters in those Fruit of the Loom underwear commercials? Was that you?
Not only was it me, I was delighted because it was fun, but also it paid the rent. What can I tell you?
Who knew that the leaf would turn out to be the great FMurrayAbraham? Well, it's been such a pleasure meeting you and such an immense honor and privilege having this opportunity to celebrate your monumental life and career. I know you're really busy rehearsing your off Broadway opening. I wish you the best of luck with the show, Murray. Thank you so much for taking the time to appear on our show.
You're welcome. When are you going to come to New York and visit?
I will come really soon, but only when you're not performing. So you have time to have lunch with me. I want to hear all those stories.
I'd be glad to anytime. I'm going to be doing a musical on Broadway soon.
Tell us about it. Can you talk about it?
Oh yes, it's called The Queen of Versailles. And if you don't know that documentary, you should take a look at it. It's a remarkable thing. About 10 years old, I think, maybe more. But Stephen Schwartz has written a musical, the man who wrote Wicked, among other things. And Kristen Chenoweth's starring it, and I play her husband. But we did it in Boston. It was a great success. It'll be here in town, and it's remarkable. So when that happens, I hope you come down and see it as my guest.
I would so love to do that. Maybe we can convince Julian Schlossberg and his wife to come with us.
If you can get Julian to New York, that's good for you.
I did it once. I think I can do it again.
I look forward to seeing you.
I look forward to meeting you in person. Thank you again for doing our show. Our guest has been the legendary FMurrayAbraham. Don't miss the chance to see him in New York in a limited engagement at the Irish Repertory Theatre in Beckett Briefs from January 15th to March 9th, 2025. You can get tickets online at irishrep.org. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time. Thank you to my producer, Steve Silver, my managers, Rick Marcelli and Robin Bragg Marcelli at the Marcelli Company in Hollywood, my director of programming, Robert Monaghan, my PR directors, Eileen Shapiro and Jimmy Starr, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.